Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this September 28, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Our opening story tonight comes from Japan, where over the Sabbath there was a volcano that erupted in Japan, and it left 30 people who were found on the mount where the volcano exploded, who are believed to be dead. They were found unresponsive, is the way rescuers put it. The hikers were not breathing and their hearts had stopped, reports said. Final confirmation of death in Japan always comes via a medical examination. The volcano, about 200 kilometers, 125 miles west of Tokyo, excuse me, friends, erupted at about noon on Saturday, spewing ash and rocks. The BBC's Rupert Wingfield-Hayes says the continuing eruptions have hampered rescue efforts.
We've just spoken to the police in Nagano Prefecture, which is dealing with the rescue, and they have described the same. They've said that 30 people were found by rescue teams in a state of pulmonary cardiac arrest. They won't declare them dead, but it seems pretty clear. These people are on top of a mountain. There are no emergency medical facilities for them to be taken to, and so if their hearts are stopped, then it seems pretty apparent that these 30 people are dead.
How tricky is this operation, even for the rescuers themselves?
Well, it's tricky because the mountain is still spewing ash into the air, and so it's very difficult, for example, to get helicopters to land. There has been a military helicopter successfully taking people off in small groups today. It was initially thought that wouldn't be possible, not just because of the ash cloud, but also because of the thick, very thick layer of ash on the top of the mountain, which the helicopter, concern was that the helicopter's engines or blades would kick that dust up, suck it into the engines, and it would destroy the engines. However, they do appear to be succeeded in at least shuttling one helicopter in and out and taking people off the mountain. Rescue teams are on top of the mountain now, helping people to descend. But of course, a new eruption could happen any time. And not only are these 30 people now declared dead, but we understand there are another 32 people perhaps who are missing, and nobody knows where they are.
And you said there could be possible further eruptions forecast. But I mean, this volcano itself seemed to take everybody by surprise.
Absolutely. You know, Japan has many active volcanoes and they are watched very, very closely. And if there's any sign of an imminent eruption, these volcanoes get closed. Big signs go up on the hiking trails, do not enter, it is dangerous. This didn't happen yesterday. There was no apparent sign that this was going to happen. Hundreds of people were up there on top of their mountain. And that's, this came essentially out of the blue. And that's why so many people were caught in this eruption.
Friends, that report by Rupert Wingfield-Hayes is from today. From today's news. We have an update from Mr. Hayes, though. Here's the update on that.
This is the moment a sunny Saturday morning on Mount Ontake suddenly turned deadly. The huge cloud of ash spewing from the mountain caught on camera by a Japanese documentary team. Further up the mountain, this hiker caught the full horror as it unfolded on his phone camera. This is really dangerous, he says. This is really bad. He scrambles downwards, hoping to get to a shelter. But in seconds, the ash cloud is over him. You can hear the tiny bits of rock raining down. It's little wonder many survivors say they were convinced they were going to die. It was terrifying, this man says. The rock was falling like hailstones. We covered our faces with anything we could find, but we still couldn't breathe or even open our eyes. Meanwhile, on top of the mountain, these screams are from a group trapped inside a hut. Ash billows outside the window. You can hear the thump-thump of rocks falling on the roof. Morning revealed the extent of the destruction. The top of the mountain turned to a moonscape, buildings covered in a thick layer of ash. As rescuers finally arrived, they found at least 30 people lay dead in the ash field. The military managed to take some survivors off by helicopter. Others were carried on stretchers. This evening, Mount Ontake is continuing to pour ash and steam into the sky. The question now is, why was there no warning? Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News, in Tokyo.
Okay, friends, and there you go. We wanted to come out. We've got the green horse up on this one because that relates to, let's go to our chart, that relates to the fourth seal from the book of Revelation, which on the chart we go over 4 columns. You see we've got the number 4, we've got the word pale there, meaning that in Revelation 6, Revelation depicts the fourth seal as a pale horse with a rider whose name is Death, and alongside whom rides Hades, hell, the grave, in other words. And Jesus Christ described the activities of this horse in 3 different terms that the gospel writers wrote up. All of them wrote up the term loimus, which is the main characteristic of this horse. Loimus meaning disease epidemics, pestilence, the plagues of Egypt. But Christ also said that between the 3rd seal and the 5th seal there would be seismus. Seismus in the Greek-English lexicons tell you that means seismic activity, and it's defined as commotions in the air, such as gale force winds of all kinds, and commotions on the ground, such as earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, like we have in this news report, and other such commotions. And the 3rd thing Christ mentioned was terike, trouble, disturbances, troubled waters, both literally and figuratively, mobs, seditions, and that makes the next story also relate to the pale horse, the 4th seal of Revelation, because in our next story we go to Hong Kong, where police have used tear gas to disperse thousands of pro-democracy protesters near the government complex after a week of escalating tensions, mobs, seditions. Dozens of demonstrators were arrested, with hundreds vowing to stay put, to continue the protest. Protesters want the Chinese government to scrap rules allowing it to vet Hong Kong's top leader in the 2017 poll. Carrie Gracie has this report from Hong Kong.
They call their movement Occupy Central with Love and Peace. This is Hong Kong Central, but there wasn't much love or peace. Riot police on the front line, but behind the smoke, an angry Beijing. They've been planning this for months. Supplies to fuel a sit-in that has no end date. They were ready for the tear gas.
We won't go home. We won't. Not only me, all of us here won't go home until we have victory at last.
But there'll be no victory if the police have their way.
Why do you need to use tear gas? They're a peaceful crowd. Why do you need to use tear gas?
The more the tear gas, the more the defiance. Tens of thousands outside government headquarters. Police go on strike, they shouted. Lay down your weapons. We have no fear, he chants. Protect the people.
A few minutes ago, the tear gas canisters were going off here, and there's still a sting in the throat and in the eyes. But right now, an uneasy standoff between the riot police and the crowd. The only thing I would say is that the crowd seems to be getting, if anything, bigger and angrier. They're stretched all the way in that direction, thousands, and up the street there, on the cross streets and up on the walkways. No sign here that they are heeding the government appeal to go home.
In mainland China, police don't put up with scenes like this. But Beijing has promised to respect Hong Kong's way of life. And that makes them the only Chinese citizens with freedom of speech.
If we miss this chance to fight for ourselves, I think Hong Kong will have no future. That's why we are
here. It feels like a dangerous moment. Who's in charge? The Communist Party, which expects to choreograph all the political drama? Or the demonstrators, who found a common voice and now intend to define their own destiny? Harry Gracie, BBC News, Hong Kong.
And friends, India is becoming a very, very big deal. And in that respect, its new Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, has come to the United States, and he spoke at Madison Square Garden. Thousands of Indian Americans have gathered there in New York for the speech by the Indian Prime Minister. He's on his first visit to the U.S. since being elected this summer, when the U.S. lifted a visa ban brought in on grounds of religious intolerance. The former Chief Minister of G-U-A-R-U-T, has always denied wrongdoing during deadly riots against Muslims in 2002. He's due to meet President Barack Obama and top U.S. business leaders. With a report on what's happening out of New York, Madison Gardens, here's the BBC's South Asia analyst, Anarasan Etharajan, who you'll hear him speak about Mr. Modi's visit.
Bharat Mata Ki.
A very good communicator. If you see the way he started, rousing the nationalistic sentiment, like he said, Bharat Mata Ki Jai, like long live Bharat, like the India, long live India, the Bharat Mata.
And they love that, don't
and
they?
The
expats love that.
They love that. And then he immediately resonated with the crowd, and they started chanting, Modi, Modi. That kind of reception you normally expect for a rock star. And how many politicians can go and speak in Madison Garden Avenue, visiting politicians to the US, except for the Americans?
It kind of reminds you, doesn't it, of President Barack Obama when he first came into power, before his first 100 days were over, the kind of rock star treatment, the great hope that he brought about amongst American people. There's so much hope surrounding Narendra Modi, isn't there, amongst Indians in India and around the world?
Especially among the Indian Americans. For the reasons, for number one, they want to do business with India. Number two, they want Mr. Modi to project India's power. It has the potential, but India has always been very shy, but reluctant to assert its authority. From the Indian perspective, those living in India, the Indian economy has stagnated for the last few years. It is only around 5%, whereas China has gone far ahead of India. Because of this political uncertainty, Indian economy did not grow. So they expect Modi to create more jobs within India. But there is also a danger, because many people think Modi can offer solution for all the problems of India. If he cannot deliver this, because he also promised a lot during his election time, the people can turn around. We have seen in India how the governments after 5 years have been thrown out by the same people. Those who came with overwhelming majority were thrown out after 5 years. So Modi is riding a wave, but it can even go against him if he's not going to deliver.
Okay, excuse me. Okay, friends, on our next story, we're going to some news related to the second seal. On our chart, you can see the second column over. It's colored red. Revelation 6 depicts the second seal as a red horse, which Jesus Christ described in plain language as having actualities, eventualities, characteristics, activities of war and rumors of war and world war, nation against nation. We're in between rounds 2 and 3, as Mr. Herbert Armstrong explained. So we're in a little recess. We're now waiting for round 3 to occur. And I don't think I'll be sticking my neck out at all to say that we can expect that World War III will not occur before November 29. A lot of people, they stick their necks out and they predict dates and they say this or that might happen by this date or that date. And, which, by the way, when I mentioned Mr. Herbert Armstrong, he's never himself, he had ministers under him who took one of the books he wrote to mean a generalized thing, although he did himself for a while think that would be a target because of Christ saying, using the term, this generation will not pass. And Mr. Armstrong understood that correctly as this generation being the annihilation generation. That this generation, from the time that mankind was able to destroy all mankind, since the testing of the hydrogen bomb, not the atomic bomb now, but the hydrogen bomb in August of 1955. From that time forward, Mr. Armstrong understood mankind now has the weapons of mass destruction, total worldwide, not only destruction, but annihilation of all mankind. And so a generation from 1955, if it were, as many of the dictionaries were defining generation at that time as a period of 20 years, if that had been the only definition for generation, then Jesus Christ's words would have had to have that this generation will not pass until all these things, until he returns. Let's go to Matthew 24 for a moment. Let me get the exact words down. And now, we're either going to see it in Matthew 24 or Luke 21 or Mark 13, where in verse 42, now, of course, in verse 36 of Matthew 24, and Mr. Armstrong was emphasizing this in 1971, while I was, what year was I? I would have been a sophomore that year at Ambassador College in Pasadena. Mr. Armstrong was emphasizing that 1972 would definitely not be the year because so many ministers, based on several factors, based on Mr. Armstrong's book, 1975 in Prophecy, book or booklet, and based on so many ministers saying 72 and we're through and that kind of thing, and Dr. Hay having come up with all kind of numbers in his compendium and what have you that said, that's it. Mr. Armstrong was coming a year ahead of time in 1971 saying, fellas, that'll be the last time possible that we would flee and then Christ return in 75? No way, because so many people are expecting that. Now, of course, this verse doesn't say no man doesn't know the year, but it does say of that day and hour knows no man. And based on that principle, Mr. Armstrong said, surely God will not allow or have or cause Jesus Christ to return so that it works out at that time, because so many were thumping that idea. And clearly a year, not after the fact, but clearly a whole year, at least a year before that, he was saying, no way 72 we flee. No way 75 Christ returns, because of all the lip flap on that. But now, and when I say people that have predicted dates, I'm not referring to him, by the way. But there are people that have made comments, expecting this and expecting that to happen by a certain date. I'm only saying this to you, and I'll explain why. I'm only saying that round 3 of World War will not occur before November 29. Why do I say that? Because on that day, the Super Pope, Francis, now Super Pope, not something he coined himself, but after that man painted that mural on the wall, I'll have to show you that picture again sometime soon, of the Pope flying through the air with a Superman cape, and everybody then seeing that picture and passing it around on Facebook and all over the internet, and the term Super Pope caught on as a result of that mural. The Pope himself has actually made statements that, hey, I'm not the Super Pope, but the Vatican did pass along links to that picture, and so they had some appreciation for those who hold the Pope in such high esteem. Now, how do we view the Pope here on this program? We view it just as the Bible explains. He's of that white horse. Now, there's some people that believe that white horse pictures Jesus Christ, because in Revelation, I think it's 19, it talks about Christ returning on a white horse. But the white horse spoken of in Revelation 6 is not Jesus Christ. And it may well be the Pope. And I'm not going to explain a whole lot more on that tonight. Some of you know exactly what I mean. Some of you may be waving your flag and saying, yeah, that's our Pope, riding a white horse. Yeah, that horse in Revelation 6, our Pope. And, there are some who've tried to explain Revelation 6 who've said, that white horse represents things that it doesn't represent. They've tried to say it represents the same horse that Revelation 19 speaks of. No, it doesn't. In fact, just the opposite. It's the anti of what Revelation 19 is referring to, with Christ returning on a white horse. But, no, where was I going with that? I had a long drive today, 100-mile round trip to a funeral down in Tuscaloosa, Paul Bear Bryant territory, for those of you who are in the sports of old, and a very famous University of Alabama football coach. I was down in that neck of the woods. It's still very much Paul Bryant territory, even though he died some time ago, and there have been many other coaches for Alabama since then. But, excuse me, I didn't do I'm a little bit exhausted, a little tired out from that trip and the funeral that I attended down there. But let's go to our next story. It relates to the second seal on this chart, the red horse. And I was just saying that since this red horse relates to war and rumors of war and world war, I was just saying that round 3, you won't expect that before November 29. That's what I was saying to you. So, and why do I say that? Because the Pope has accepted an invitation to appear and speak before the European Parliament in Strasbourg on that date, on November 29. And so a new emperor will not, the Pope who will ride the beast, as the Bible speaks about it, that all of that will not have come together before this November 29 date of his speaking before the European Parliament. Now, anytime thereafter, it may all shape together. The Parliament may say after this November 29 speaking by the Pope, hey, the Pope is our man. He's the religion that the European Union is going to endorse. And it may all start to tie together thereafter. We'll have to see what happens on November 29. But I'm telling you, you got a respite here with the feast coming up. World War III will not be revived. The revival of World War, round 3, will not occur before November 29. That's just plain, flat, outright logic. You can bank your boots on that. Now, talk about boots and no boots on the ground and that kind of thing. Our next story, the U.S.-led coalition aircraft have targeted 4 makeshift oil refineries under Islamic State control in Syria as well as a command center. Early indications were that the attacks by U.S., Saudi, and UAE planes were successful, according to the U.S. Central Command. Explosions at a refinery at Tel Abyad near the Turkish border lit up the night sky, and according to an eyewitness watching from across the frontier. Paul Wood has this report on the Islamic State situation.
The latest cockpit video shows a US airstrike obliterating what's said to be a base for Islamic State fighters. This was yesterday near the besieged Kurdish town of Kobani. Whatever damage was done to the jihadis, their assault on Kobani continued while we were there on Saturday. The fate of Kobani is being decided now in small skirmishes on the hillsides and in the countryside surrounding the town. The Kurdish defenders are grateful for the airstrikes this morning, but they have not been decisive. This battle is far from over. The Kurdish forces are poorly armed, but they are a single united force in Syria and capable of taking advantage of the airstrikes. They'd just like to see more of them. Morale is high, says this Kurdish man. People are defending themselves, but the aerial bombardment yesterday was next to useless. Elsewhere in Syria, this group, the Nusra Front, are also being hit by airstrikes because of their links to Al-Qaeda. Nusra's response is to call on jihadis worldwide to attack any countries joining the air campaign. Nusra is getting support because of the belief that airstrikes are killing the innocent too. These are the homes of unarmed civilians, says the commentary on this video posted online today. So a number of Syrian armed groups oppose the airstrikes. British Tornadoes continued flying combat missions today, but over Iraq, not Syria. That would probably take a further vote in Parliament. The political terrain in Syria is far more complicated, allies on the ground far more difficult to find. That is where the Islamic State may be hardest to beat. Paul Wood, BBC News, on Turkey's border with Syria.
Friends, now also related to this red horse of war, I have some video footage that comes from 60 Minutes. It's just a very small excerpt. It's courtesy of 60 Minutes to the BBC News, and we'll be playing it here under license, the license of BBC News, again courtesy of 60 Minutes, in which you'll see that President Obama has acknowledged that the U.S. misjudged the rise of Islamic State in Syria. You'll hear him say, "Our head of the intelligence community, Jim Clapper, has acknowledged that I think they underestimated what had been taking place in Syria." Speaking to Steve Croft on 60 Minutes, the president added, you'll hear him, we have this part of the excerpt here, "It is so important for us to recognize part of our solution here is going to be military." In the latest military action, U.S.-led coalition aircraft targeted 4 makeshift oil refineries. We just showed you that video under Islamic State control in Syria, as well as a command center. Again, here, this footage is courtesy of 60 Minutes.
I think our head of the intelligence community, Jim Clapper, has acknowledged that I think they underestimated what had been taking place in Syria. Essentially what happened with ISIL was that you had Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which was a vicious group, but our Marines were able to quash with the help of Sunni tribes. They went back underground, but over the past couple of years, during the chaos of the Syrian civil war, where essentially you have huge swaths of the country that are completely ungoverned, they were able to reconstitute themselves and take advantage of that chaos and attract foreign fighters who believed in their jihadist nonsense and traveled everywhere from Europe to the United States to Australia to other parts of the Muslim world converging on Syria. And so this became ground zero for jihadists around the world. And they've been very savvy in terms of their social media. In some cases, you have old remnants of Saddam Hussein's military that had been expunged from the Iraqi military, which gave them some traditional military capacity and not just terrorist capacity. And this is one of the challenges that we're going to have generally, is where you've got states that are failing or in the midst of civil war, these kinds of organizations thrive. That's why it's so important for us to recognize part of our solution here is going to be military. We just have to push them back and shrink their space and go after their command and control and their capacity and their weapons and their fueling and cut off their financing and work to eliminate the flow of foreign fighters. But what we also have to do is we have to come up with political solutions in Iraq and Syria in particular, but in the Middle East generally, that arise at an accommodation between Sunni and Shia populations that right now are the biggest cause of conflict, not just in the Middle East, but in the world.
Okay, friends, and more news related to that Red Seal comes out of the situation happening in the Ukraine. With our next story, activists in Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, have pulled down a statue of the former Russian leader Lenin in a move supported by officials. Several hundred people gathered in Kharkiv's Freedom Square on yesterday. No, I'm sorry. That since they're ahead of us, that's still today. They gathered in Kharkiv's Freedom Square tonight, Sunday night. That'd be several hours ago now over in Europe, but it was Sunday night, and cheered as the monument came down. Michel Hussein has this report with that.
Anti-Russian protesters in the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv have toppled a prominent statue of Lenin. Hundreds gathered in the city's main square to see the statue pulled down to cheers and anti-Russia chants. It follows previous attempts earlier in the year to remove the statue.
Okay, friends, there you are on that story. I think they're showing a little upset with Lenin in Kharkiv. All right, our next story, we're going to switch over to the Pale Horse for this because it relates to disturbances, trouble, mobs, sedition, that kind of thing. And Catalonia, their leader decrees a referendum on independence. They're going to, in other words, they're going to stay with this referendum thing in Catalonia against Spain. The president of the Spanish region of Catalonia has signed a decree calling for a referendum on independence, and that's in, they said the situation in Scotland and the UK not going to affect them. Of course, Spain is very much against even this referendum being held, very much against Catalonia breaking off in any kind of independence. Arthur Mas wants Catalonia to hold the Scottish-style vote, though, on November 9. But he doesn't have the backing of the central government in Madrid. Tom Burridge has full report on this, and you're going to hear her say there's some flash photography amidst this report.
The following report contains flash photography.
A short but symbolic act. Catalonia's president is determined to hold a referendum on independence from Spain in a matter of weeks. And by signing this decree calling for a vote, Artur Mas made a direct challenge to the Spanish central government in Madrid.
We stand for democracy, dialogue, and peace. We believe that political issues must be resolved by negotiation and civilized attitudes. And we know that democracy is the most civilized way to resolve difficulties between nations. This is our will, and this is also our commitment.
But on a trip promoting Spanish business in China, Spain's Prime Minister, Mariano Rajoy, has already moved to try and block Catalonia's planned referendum. He'll hold a special cabinet meeting early next week. Spain's written constitution says any referendum would require the backing of the Spanish parliament. Spain's central government says a vote would be illegal and will appeal to the country's constitutional court. A large section of Catalan society want a vote, and hundreds of thousands demonstrated again on Barcelona's streets earlier this month. They believe they can hold a referendum using local laws. Meanwhile, the former Catalan president, many the father of Catalonia's modern nationalist movement, Jordi Pujol, appeared in Catalonia's parliament to deny serious allegations of corruption. Weeks ago, it emerged he had millions of euros in a bank account in Andorra. His successor, the current Catalan leader, now plans a vote. The key question now is how the Spanish government will respond. The attitudes on both sides are hardening, and the Spanish government is determined that a referendum in Catalonia will not happen. Spain's foreign minister has even suggested that his administration could suspend the powers of the Catalan government. For the authorities here, the territorial integrity of Spain is at stake. Tom Burridge, BBC News in Madrid.
Okay, thank you, Tom Burridge. And friends, in our next story, now let me explain. We're going a little bit over tonight, the usual half hour I try to target for the program, because on Sunday night, after having not done a program on Friday night and Saturday night, but this week even more than that, we didn't do one Thursday night because that was the end of the day for the Feast of Trumpets this year. We didn't do a program Wednesday night either because that was the eve of the beginning of trumpets. So we haven't been on since Tuesday, and there's been a lot that's kind of happened. Although in some ways I see that we're going to be seeing a lot of the same old. But I've got an interesting story for you I think you'll appreciate next. I'm not going to put the pale horse up for it like trouble or disturbances. We're going to give them all the breaks in the world. And except to say this, that, you know, there are some who are called now to become the bride of Jesus Christ. That's not the only way that I'm relating this story to the Bible and prophecy. There's something else about that bride to Jesus Christ we'll talk about, and how it compares to this wedding that has occurred in Venice. And the day after their wedding in Venice, actor George Clooney, who married a human rights lawyer, you'll hear her name in the video, they've taken a trip on the city's canals. The couple smiled and waved as their boat was surrounded by a flotilla carrying photographers and onlookers. Hollywood stars such as Matt Damon, Bill Murray, you'll hear others mentioned in this video, were among the guests at yesterday's reception. The wedding was one of the most keenly anticipated showbiz events of the year. I've got two videos on it. Here's the first one.
We'll bring you these pictures of a very famous actor and an equally famous now human rights lawyer. This, of course, is George Clooney and Amal Alamuddin. They have been married in the romantic city of Venice. And as you can see from these photos, these pictures, they are now leaving the hotel and out on the waters of Venice's canals for a romantic post-matrimonial trip. They look very happy, don't they? The couple emerged having danced, yes, apparently until nearly dawn.
Friends, I have to tell you, my dad took my mom for a vacation, doing the same thing on the canals of Venice. Okay, now we're going to come on out of this video as they fade into the background there and continue their trip, because I've got one more on that. And now, why am I relating this to the marriage to Jesus Christ, which is not going to happen on this earth, by the way? The Father's going to be giving away that bride, and as he gives away that bride, the bride and the groom have got to go up where the Father is, because he's not coming down here until after the millennium. Well, it doesn't say exactly when or if then, but, you know, it is his footstool, the earth is, and according to Scripture, and but he's not coming here before, he's letting Christ have the dominion and the rule and the kingship here through the millennium. And, you know, Christ may go up there a few times, maybe the bride too another few times, but that's a subject that we usually cover in details on our weekend Sabbath service channel. But I've got but here's what I wanted to tell you about that, and then I got one more video on that fabulous wedding. And that big as you heard it mentioned, it was a Hollywood style type wedding. You know, the world will not see the wedding in heaven that we'll be part of as the brides, some of us that are counted worthy for that first resurrection. But you know, right now all the world's famous and top echelon people are, not all of them, but many top echelon people are, you know, this is a big deal wedding here, real big splash. And right now, here's how I was relating this. There's a scripture that says, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. Right now, there's a lot of us that are considered the last of the echelon of this world. Even the two witnesses, as they go do their thing, you know, they'll be, in a way, they'll be the top dogs from God's kingdom during the Great Tribulation. Yet they will be, how will they be dressed? The Bible describes them dressed as being dressed in sackcloth and ashes. And so I'm certainly making no claim to doing that kind of a witness, because you see me sit here dressed in a suit and a tie, or at least you see my suit coat, and you know, and not dressed in sackcloth and ashes. But the comparison is this: is that you've got the number one people, the first of this world for this moment, but after Christ returns, that's when that's going to play in. The first shall be last. The last, which that's some of us who are called now and who are part of the first fruits, those who are counted worthy will become not only the first fruits, they'll become the first of the new world, of the world under Jesus Christ, after he returns and restores the kingdom of God and replaces all of the governments of man and mankind. All right, here is another video on the Hollywood star George Clooney after his marriage and marriage reception yesterday to the human rights lawyer. It was in a private ceremony in the Italian city of Venice. And Cindy Crawford is mentioned in this video. The BBC's Namia Iqbal has another report on this.
It's fair to say this was never going to be a small wedding. Sweeping up Venice's Grand Canal earlier today, George Clooney was greeted by screaming fans and the paparazzi. It seems everyone turned up to see one of Hollywood's biggest stars tie the knot. Bono, Matt Damon, Cindy Crawford, Anna Wintour, all on the guest list for his marriage to British human rights lawyer Amal Alamuddin. The wedding celebration kicked off yesterday when the couple arrived in Venice riding a water taxi. The 53-year-old actor got engaged to Amal in April. The 36-year-old's wedding was also celebrated in her family's home village in Lebanon. In a statement tonight, George Clooney's publicist said the actor was now married. There will be a civil ceremony on Monday, spelling the end of the actor's long-standing status as one of Hollywood's most eligible bachelors. Nomia Iqbal, BBC News.
Okay, friends, and you know, sometimes it's good to have a little light story in the news, something of, you know, interest. I'm sure a lot of you ladies like to see marriage type things and things like that. Now, I got to be sure and get our video off for this next couple of 60-second things I want to show you before we sign off, and we'll finish up with this tonight. You know, we were reporting how the U.S. and the Arab allies have launched. Earlier in our news reports, we were telling you how the airstrikes by the U.S. and the Arab allies against Islamic State militants in Syria have been being carried on. The attacks served as the first combat test for the F-22 Raptor aircraft. It's a new generation of advanced fighter jet that was commissioned decades ago. In this 60-second report, you will see an explanation of what this F-22 is capable of, and I believe we'll also have some figures as to how much an incredible amount of billions of dollars the Pentagon is spending for just 195 of these. Here's the video, and I'll stay with you and read the comments as it rolls here, because we can't play the music under it. Work on the F-22 Raptor started in 1988. Lockheed Martin says it will provide air dominance for the next 40 years. Production costs have spiraled. The Pentagon has spent $67 billion for 195 jets. The F-22 has Super Cruise. It can fly in stealth mode faster than the speed of sound for up to 3,200 kilometers. 3,200 kilometers. It is designed to fly missions without opponents even knowing it was deployed. And it can drop bombs on targets 25 kilometers away, about 18 to 20 miles away. Okay, and that's that video, and I've got one more of a similar type video I'm going to show you, and we'll close with this one, friends. In this 60-second video by Michael Hurst, it will answer the question, what does Islamic State want? Now, we've done some videos like this before, but here's a September 23 update from just last week. The U.S. and Arab allies have launched strikes against Islamic State militants in Syria. As we pointed out, the Pentagon said warplanes, drones, and Tomahawk missiles were used in the attacks, which targeted several areas, including IS stronghold Raqqa. The move follows U.S. airstrikes against IS targets in Iraq. Now, in this BBC video, it's going to explain. I'll stay with you and read the captions to you with this one also. Can't play the music in this one either. We don't have a license for the music underneath, so I have to be sure I killed the audio switch. The BBC explains in this video who the jihadists are and what they want in this 60-second video produced by Michael Hurst. Islamic State. Islamic State jihadists claim to be running a caliphate, and I'm sorry I missed that. They want to enforce their view of conservative Islamic traditions. The caliphate covers IS-controlled areas in northern Syria and northwestern Iraq. Leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is now Caliph Ibrahim. Caliphs are seen as political successors to the Prophet Muhammad. IS uses social media to spread fear More than 130,000 Syrians have fled to Turkey in recent days. Islamic State has some 30,000 fighters known for their brutality, and that figure, by the way, has been updated since the last time we showed this, where it was thought to only be 10,000 fighters. You can see now it's updated to 30,000, and it is said to be raising, the Islamic State is raising $2 million a day from oil sales, taxes, extortion, and smuggling. The U.S. and Arab partners are launching airstrikes on Syrian targets to degrade and destroy Islamic State. That's their stated goal. And that's the little video on that. So we'll come on out of what's just gone, screen gone black. We'll just come on out of that. And that's it for our Sunday night report. Friends, back on the air since last Tuesday, after we had a long break for Feast of Trumpets, and then the weekend followed that. And we, God willing, we should be here, not only tomorrow night, Monday night, but we should be here through the rest of this week, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night. Thursday night's always our last report for the week. And then those of you who will be observing the Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, you know, that falls this year. It falls on the regular weekly Sabbath this coming Sabbath, this Saturday. So that'll be, in a certain sense, a double Sabbath in the sense that it's both a regular Sabbath day and a high Sabbath, an annual Sabbath, all combined in that one day, which you know, the high Sabbath overtakes the regular weekly Sabbath in the sense that that day will be the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, this coming Sabbath. We might want to keep our eye on Israel before and after that and just see if anything unusual like in 1967 happens again this year. But that's it for this Sunday night report, friends. Thank you for joining me. God willing and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again tomorrow night, Monday night, with our regular current day's news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying, good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.